Welcome to Crime to Court. Welcome back. We haven't been with you for a while, and some of that, or actually all of that, has been because of this thing that we've learned to live with called COVID-19. And so while we regret that we've been away, we're glad to be back talking about issues that of crime and criminal justice that affect the citizens of York County and the surrounding areas. As you can see with next to me, I have two guests. Solicitor Brackett was not able to make it. Normally we would reschedule this recording, but I do have two special guests here. One to my right, as you can tell by his dress, is not from around here. And we had to fly our friend Sheriff Mark Lamb in from Pinal County, Arizona. And to my left is the State Law Enforcement Division Chief, Mark Keel. He is head of the State Law Enforcement Division. And today we are going to talk to you about medical and somewhat recreational marijuana. But first I want to give my guest, Sheriff Lamb and Chief Keel, just a moment to introduce themselves. And Sheriff, thank you for coming.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the Southern hospitality.
Yes,
I appreciate it. And it's an honor to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to come out and speak to the folks here in York County and South Carolina. I'm Sheriff Lamb. I'm from Arizona. Pinal County is the sheriff I'm the sheriff in, and we are located we're 5,400 square miles between Phoenix and Tucson, Arizona. Population of about 500,000 people. I've been fortunate enough to be the sheriff now for 5 years. It's an honor to serve the people. What do you want to know about me? I'm a patriot. I love the rule of law enforcement. I love the Constitution. I love America. I love freedom, and I love the opportunity I have to fight for it every day. And you know, part of that is trying to keep drugs out of our community. So It's an honor to be here to speak about this today.
Well, he may or may not be recognizable to you, but Sheriff Lamb's kind of been around the circuit, and you may have seen him on Live PD. And
60 days in.
He has started something called the American Sheriff's Network, and we certainly appreciate what he's doing across America for our law enforcement. Chief Keel?
I'm Mark Keel, and as I said, I'm Chief of the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. Started my career in 1976, working narcotics, Orangeburg County Sheriff's Department, and went to work in SLED in 1979. Spent the first about 2.5 years working undercover narcotics, and then went on to another assignment, went back and worked another 3.5 years in narcotics enforcement. So to be able to be here and talk about marijuana is something that's important to me. It's something that I've seen a lot of in my years here at SLED. Again, I'm proud to be here as well. This is a topic that I think most people know that I am very much opposed to here in South Carolina. I've pretty well made that very well known, and continue to oppose this bill that we're going to discuss today.
Well, why don't we do that? Chief, of course, you and I both have been involved in this legislative process. You've been involved much longer than I have. But as president of the Sheriff's Association, I've had more involvement in the last year or so with this process that South Carolina is undergoing, and that is they have been studying and authoring bills to introduce what is termed as medical marijuana to the citizens of South Carolina. But you can talk a little bit about the bill if you want in its current state. And you know, we brought Sheriff Lamb here to sort of quiz him and ask him questions, because they went medical marijuana in 2010 and they went recreational in 2021.
Right. I think, you know, one of the things the proponents of this bill have talked about how conservative this bill is. You know, the first thing I want to say is they talk about it being medical marijuana, and I will say proponents have done a wonderful job in making people believe that. When I go out and speak to people and I actually tell them what this bill is about, they always say, Chief, I had no idea. You know, if we're going to talk about real medicine, if we're going to treat it as real medicine, then it should be like every other medication that we have. It should be something that's approved by the Food and Drug Administration. It's something that should be able to be prescribed by your doctor and be able to be purchased at a legitimate pharmacy, a CVS or Walgreens. That is not what this bill is about. The problems that I have with this bill are many, but I think some of the ones that just off the top of my head that I always talk about is, one is there's no limits on the potency of the THC that is in Senate Bill 150. So it actually allows for substances that we know in law enforcement is dab and wax and shatter that can be up to 80 and 90% pure THC. That's nothing like we've ever seen with marijuana, in our country. If you talk about, mom and pop's marijuana, we're talking about 3 to 4%. So we're talking about a purity that we've never seen before. And that creates real problems because nobody knows what the results of that type of marijuana use is with that type potency. The other thing we have in this bill is it allows vaping. We know right now that vaping is the preferred method of young people. And that's what we're trying to protect, is we're trying to protect our young people. And then one of the other portions of this bill, if you look at being a conservative bill, even in California and in Colorado, where they have both recreational and medical marijuana, there's an opt-out provision that allows local governments to opt out and not be part of this. This bill does not allow that. This bill mandates that it is in every county, in every jurisdiction in the state of South Carolina. Those are just some of the issues that I see. There's many more, obviously.
All right, well, that's good information, and we're going to take a quick break here, and we'll be talking more medical and some recreational marijuana issues coming right up. Stay with us. Welcome back to this edition of Crime to Court. I'm Sheriff Kevin Tolson, and again with me today, to my right, is Sheriff Mark Lamb from Pinal County, Arizona, and the Chief of the State Law Enforcement Division here in South Carolina, Sheriff Mark Keel. We welcome you back, and we're discussing the current bill that is being considered in the Senate of South Carolina on quote-unquote medical marijuana. And Sheriff Lamb, just a question for you. You are a state that has seen the transition from illegal marijuana to medical marijuana, from all marijuana being illegal to medical to now recreational. What's that landscape look like?
It's been a rough road. In 2010, they legalized marijuana in Arizona. It didn't stop the trafficking from Mexico. We would find 1,000-pound, 2,000-pound loads in the desert area on the south end of my county coming in from Mexico. What it did was, what we saw was that medical marijuana actually created an avenue, an appetite for marijuana in our communities.
So normally people that might not have had tried marijuana.
Yeah, the proponents this is kind of a Trojan horse. The proponents will sell medical marijuana and they'll tell you that story of that young child who has seizures. And look, my heart goes out to any child that has to deal with that. And I would hope that the government would find a means, an FDA-approved means to be able to deal with that. But doing kind of a ad hoc dispensary and making it so anybody can get it. Really, what we saw was up to 90% of the people that had medical marijuana cards were in what should have been the optimal health time of their life, between 20 and probably 35 years old.
And for what were they prescribed it for?
They will go into a doctor. They don't have to prove it. They just have to say they had chronic pain. And a doctor will issue them a medical marijuana. I'm going to tell you a personal story, and I haven't told you this, is my son was one of those people who got a medical marijuana card.
Wow.
And now there's people that will say this is a gateway drug, and other people will say, oh, come on, don't tell it. Not everybody who does marijuana does other drugs. But I will tell you that my son started off with marijuana and eventually started doing fentanyl. And we're facing some serious things right now in our family, where he actually was driving under the influence of marijuana and Xanax and hit somebody on a bike. Luckily, the guy didn't die, but they sued my family. My son's got to go to jail for 6 months. So it hits every family.
Well, that's what I was going to say. If that doesn't illustrate any point, it illustrates that this epidemic of drugs and drug addiction does not discriminate by age, by wealth, by position.
Right. And I don't tell that story as I don't, not to put my family's laundry out there, or to undermine my son in any way. He's learned some hard lessons and he's grown from it. But I say it because you sell it to the people as one thing, but I would say that the negatives that come to your society are far greater. The impact it will have on, my son wouldn't have been able to get into marijuana or eventually into other drugs had he not been able to get a medical marijuana card.
Well, you know, that's interesting because, Chief, I think we had a concern, you as SLED and the Sheriff's Association had a concern that was going to happen in South Carolina.
Right.
And so they changed the definition, right?
That's right. They changed the definition from
Chronic
pain because we were very concerned about that. We'd heard the stories from other states where, again, the healthiest demographic in our society, 18 to 35-year-old males were 90% of the card holders, and they were getting it for chronic pain.
Yeah.
And so in South Carolina, again, proponents of the bill took that chronic pain out and said, well, if you could get a prescription for opioid for whatever it was you had a problem for, then you could get marijuana, which, you know, the opioid is part of the problem. Some people think that's the solution for the opioid crisis. And we know as well that's not the case either. If you just look at the statistics of the number of opioid overdose deaths in those states that have medical marijuana now, we know that's not been the solution either.
And you know, I just talked to our HIDA representative, and for HIDA is a High Intensity Drug Trafficking Administration. And so basically it's like your drug units, and they monitor all the drug traffic within your state. And in our state, we are now number 12 for fentanyl overdoses in Arizona, and we are number 5 for methamphetamine overdoses. So I would bet you if you looked at the other states like California, Colorado, Nevada, Oregon, states that have legalized both first medical, then recreational, I would venture to say that they are probably in the top of those numbers amongst the 50 states for overdoses of other drugs as well. And the other thing we talked about, with the highway, the states, and as a sheriff, we deal with vehicle accidents all the time. Those states have seen a 6% increase in vehicle accidents in those states, at 4% being an increase in fatality accidents. So how many lives are you really saving with medical marijuana, but how many lives are you jeopardizing? If you're seeing an increase of 6% on traffic accidents, 4% fatalities, then you have overdoses that are clearly on the rise in this country. Why in the world would a state want to take that jump and put themselves in a position where they're just going to increase those numbers? The other states have all the proof.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I serve on our local substance abuse board, Keystone, and the staff there will tell me and tell you, again, not every person that tries marijuana is going to end up being addicted to fentanyl or heroin, but they will tell you that almost every single person addicted to drugs in their clinic at their agency started with marijuana. And I'm not up here demonizing medicine, and I think I speak for most of the sheriffs across the state that if the FDA can study and approve a drug and say that in this manner, in this dosage unit, in this form, it is safe for people with this condition, I think every sheriff in the state, and Chief Keel, you'd probably go along with it. But that's not what this bill says.
No, Chief, Sheriff, I have said from the very beginning that I don't want people to think that law enforcement is not compassionate toward the needs of society. I mean, certainly we are. And the one thing that I've said from the beginning, I support additional funding for research into this. I'm not saying that there's not the possibility that there may be something in this plant that's beneficial.
Well, it's interesting
but the only thing I want to do is do it. If you're going to call it medicine, then let's treat it like medicine.
Yeah.
And let's go through the process that every other medicine that is on the shelf today goes through, and and that physicians can adequately provide a dosage, with a where you have legalization of smoking marijuana in a recreational form. How do you give a dosage for that? I mean, what percentage of THC is that green plant material, or what percentage of THC is in that liquid, and how many drops a day? What's the interaction with other drugs? These are all things that we have concerns about in law enforcement, besides the fact of public safety concerns we have, the accidents on our highways, the crime involved with additional drugs being legalized in our society, where we've already, have a difficult time with it.
And just to touch on that real quick, what a lot of the viewers probably don't, most Americans don't realize, is the reason why Walgreens is not going to sell it if you legalize it, or if you legalize medicinal marijuana, is because on a national level it is still illegal.
That's right.
Therefore, the average pharmacy can't do it because they can't deposit that money in a bank. So it becomes a cash industry, which makes it wrought for robbery, for crime. It doesn't mean that it's going to happen, but it obviously, don't think that these guys don't see that. That it's a cash business, and so that's some of the things you have to look at. What we've seen is an increase in homelessness in all the states that we've mentioned that have legalized medicinal marijuana and recreational marijuana. Have seen increases in homelessness. Now you'll have critics say, "Well, everybody's seen an increase," and they'll try to downplay it, but I think you can make a strong case that homeless increase is indeed due to, large in part, because of the usage of marijuana there. So those are some of the issues. We talked about DUIs. DUIs are a tremendous problem for us. When we first had DUI problems back before 2010, it was probably 30% were DUI drugs, few and far between. Once we legalized it at medicinal level, it probably jumped up to about 70%. I just was with my guys. We're just finishing our first year of recreational marijuana. And at the Christmas, New Year's Eve, I talked to my traffic guys, and we were running about 90% of all the DUIs they're getting right now are DUI drugs, and those are predominantly marijuana. Because people think that they have a medicine card, a card that says the doctor says they can use it, we'll pull people over and say, well, hey, have you been smoking marijuana? Yeah, but I have a card. Yeah, but you can't drive with it. Right. Alcohol is legal, but you can't go get drunk and then get in your car and drive. It's against the law. It's the same with the medicinal marijuana. And I don't know that the states did enough education as far as letting people know you can't smoke and drive as well. And hence the 6% increase in crashes, 4% increase in fatalities.
Well, and they hadn't provided adequate method to be able to test people driving. And we know that the best test is a blood test, but not every state's going to allow law enforcement officers to draw blood.
We've had to become phlebotomists. We've had to send a ton of our deputies in to be phlebotomists now. And so we've incurred a cost and a burden on our resources and on the judicial system. So,
well, it's interesting, and it's also interesting to note that it's not that there's not marijuana derivatives out there that are in medicine form that have been approved and are in use and approved by the FDA. Marinol, I know, is one of them.
That's right.
There's another one that's, what's that?
Epidiolex.
Epidiolex, which is, I think, the latest one that's come out that is treating people for seizures. And it is a prescribed amount, and it's not unregulated and not uncontrolled. So it's not that there aren't marijuana derivatives out there that are proven to help people. It's just not in a smokable, free form that we don't know what we're getting. And I don't know of any other drug, that a doctor will prescribe for you to vape or smoke or ingest like that. And I also don't know of any other drug that the medical community hasn't studied and supported, and the legislature simply says, this is what we're going to call a drug, not the medical community. And so I think that, there's a lot of concerns that we have that we're trying to let our constituency know and the community know to do their research, talk to their legislators about this bill, and see where it goes from here.
Well, Sheriff, one thing just add to that too is that the South Carolina Medical Association it's not just law enforcement that's opposed to this bill. The South Carolina Medical Association has been opposed to this bill. The Business and Industry Political Education Committee, BIPEC, has been opposed to this bill. The Palmetto Family Council is opposed to this bill. So it's not just law enforcement.
That's right.
Again, there are a lot of folks that when they learn what this bill does are opposed to it.
Great. That's great information, and we need to take another break. Stay with us and we'll be right back. Hi, I'm Sheriff Kevin Tolson with the York County Sheriff's Office. We're looking to hire great men and women now to be part of our family. Law enforcement is still a very exciting and noble profession, we've got plenty of opportunities here for you at the Sheriff's Office. You want to be SWAT? We got you. You'll be part of a dive team? We got you. We've got room for advancement here too. You want to be part of management? Good double bogey, Kevin. Interested in courthouse security? Come see us. Or you can be a part of the best detention center in the state. We need detention officers and nurses too. We got the best canine program around. Come run with us. Like solving puzzles? Come be a detective. So we want you to come join us. And if you haven't heard enough, we've got one thing nobody else in the state's got. A donut shop right across the street! Welcome back to Crime to Court. Again, I'm Sheriff Kevin Tolson. I am here with Sheriff Mark Lamb from Pinal County, Arizona, and Chief Mark Keel from the State Law Enforcement Division, and we are talking medical marijuana and recreational marijuana. South Carolina, again, Sheriff is on the precipice of having serious consideration for a medical marijuana bill, and you know, through this show today, we've had discussions, and you know, there is a concern amongst some leaders that this really isn't about medical marijuana. The end game is recreational marijuana, which is not conversations necessarily that Chief Keel and I have had with proponents of these medical bills. My question to you is, was there any talk when Arizona was discussing medical marijuana that, hey, one day we want this to be recreational?
Yeah, I think most of us in law enforcement saw it from what it was, a Trojan horse, you know, that this was just the first step to legalizing marijuana on a recreational level. We have a state legislature and a state senate that is Republican, predominantly Republican, so the bill wouldn't have passed. So what they actually did is, in Arizona, we have what's called ballot measure, which means that they can go out and get enough signatures to get it directly on the ballot. It bypasses the legislature, and the people directly get to vote on it. Now, I am a constitutional guy, and I believe the voice of the people matters. The people voted to legalize recreational marijuana, so in the end, I deal with that as a sheriff.
Absolutely.
Because it's the voice of the people.
Completely understand.
But I will tell you,
are they an informed public?
No, I think that they did not see the negative consequences that would come with it. And even on the medical marijuana, we created, as a state, we created a level of contraband and illegal activity. We made it a lot easier. We created a whole nother market of it, because before you would get your marijuana from a drug dealer on the street. Well, now you would have some 20-year-old college student that would go and get it, and then he would sell it to his friends. So you started creating all these little micro markets of drug dealers, of guys that had a medical marijuana card and now selling it to teenagers, selling it to other kids in college.
Like turning 21 and you're not, and you get your buddy to go buy you some beer.
Right, and that's exactly what we would see. We would see people, we would catch them with marijuana with another person's prescription. And so you create this whole black market, you create this whole other underlying criminal activity, and you're creating criminals out of kids that are probably not bad kids. Right. They're just smoking marijuana, they go out and get this medical marijuana card. What they don't realize is them selling medical marijuana to other people is going to land them in prison. And you're turning regular citizens into criminals. And I don't like any law that does that.
Sure.
And I think that's some of the dangers of the medical marijuana that you'll be facing.
You know, I mentioned having an informed constituency and voter base, and you know, it's interesting, Chief, there was a survey done here locally by our local university that talked about, and was actually a survey, and the survey there were two questions, if I remember correctly, and the first one was, do you favor medical marijuana?
That's correct.
77%,
I think it was.
Yes, that's the headline. Now the follow-up question is what I think most of the public doesn't know, and that was whether or not, if you had it, should it be approved by the Food and Drug Administration? And the result of that survey question was 78%. So 77%, yeah, I favor medical marijuana.
Yeah.
And even more people said, if I favored it, it needs to be studied and approved.
It needs to be approved by the Food and Drug Administration. Yeah. It goes back to, again, what we've said all along about this substance is, you know, if you're going to treat it as medicine, if you're going to call it medicine, then let's treat it like every other medication. You know, let's have it something that is not recommended by a physician or not certified by a physician, but can be prescribed by a physician. Today, you cannot legally prescribe marijuana because, again, it's still against federal law.
Even if it is approved by the state.
Even if it's approved by state. If Senate Bill 150 passes, again, it can only be recommended. It cannot be prescribed. And so, you know, what we have said all along, again, is if it's to the point that we can have it approved by Food and Drug Administration, prescribed by a doctor, purchased at a pharmacy like everybody goes to, Walgreens, CVS, and not a dispensary, because that's where you have to buy this now. If it passes in this bill, you'd be going to a dispensary and buying it. And so if we get to that point, then, you know, I've told proponents, you won't hear any more out of me, you know, if it gets to the point that Food and Drug Administration has approved it, but we're not there yet.
Sheriff, what does a dispensary in Arizona look like?
Well, you know, they try to make them look as good as they can because they put them in, they're trying to put them in every neighborhood. But I'll tell you, in my community, I still, even though it's legal, our community fights these dispensaries tooth and nail. And a lot of the dispensaries end up being in the less favorable parts of town, you know, the less desirable parts of town, because that's where they can get the property. That's where people aren't going to fight against them. And so it ends up kind of dragging in that underbelly with it.
And
so
a part of town that's already doesn't need that help.
Yeah, that's right.
What does recreational marijuana look like in Arizona now? What forms is it taking? And who, in your opinion, does it target?
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up, because if you go into a medical marijuana store, you would think it's a kid's store. They're marketing it like candy, gummy bears, and all these different things to the kids. That's really their target market because it creates long-term customers.
Absolutely. Just like cigarettes. You know, you try to start them early, get them addicted to it, and then there will be lifetime customers.
And just, I know we're running short on time. I just want to say the cartel's putting fentanyl in everything now. We're finding fentanyl in heroin, meth, cocaine, even marijuana, and even the THC. So just know that opens that up for that too.
Wow. So again, more interesting information, and we hope that we can continue to educate our community and the public on not only medical but recreational marijuana. And we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Well, yeah, I've been in the elevator pretty much all day. Oh, let me let you go. Sheriff!
Hey, where you been? I've been looking for you all day.
It's National Talk on an Elevator Day.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's,
So you've been on the elevator talking all day?
all day. I mean, 24 hours, no. A couple hours, yes.
Okay. Well, I didn't know we paid you to do that, so.
Well, it's informational.
Oh, okay.
It's public information.
Oh, okay.
So, public information officer.
Okay, kind of makes sense.
You got anything you want to talk about in an elevator?
Personally, professionally, how much time you got?
Let's keep it professional.
Okay, all right.
Informational.
Never thought about that. National Talk on Elevator Day. It's awkward,
Yes. It's been awkward.
but we kind of know each other, so I mean, so professionally. Well, you know, we're always seem to be hiring.
Yes, sir.
So we're recruiting.
Yes, sir.
We've got a good team, like family here.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly need detention officers right now. And
Absolutely.
pay's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Benefits are good. Got a good canine program.
Mm-hmm.
Got all kinds of things to do here.
Mm-hmm. I hear that.
Oh, you may not know this. You know what else we got?
A donut shop right across the street!
We do have that.
Yummy.
Welcome back to Crime to Court. We've had a lengthy conversation about medical marijuana, the effects that you've seen, Sheriff, in Arizona, recreational marijuana, the effects that you are now starting to see. And you know, Chief, we had similar concerns about the hemp bill that was recently passed, that it was not going to be what it was wrapped up to be, what it was sold to us as. And we voiced those concerns, and yet the hemp bill passed. And now what we see is we're not seeing just rope and soap and door panels being made. What are we seeing in our hemp shops?
Well, what we're seeing in our hemp shops is we're seeing it being sold as flour, which again, had people telling us when that bill was going through the process that was not going to happen. That was not what it was being. It was going to be used in manufacturing, to manufacture products. And so what we're seeing now is we're seeing these products sold in stores, flour, and they're all, 70% of those that we're testing in our laboratory are above the legal limit.
Which makes
of
it
what
marijuana.
hemp, which makes it marijuana.
Which is what our concern was.
Exactly. And that was our concern that we let folks know about when we were debating that bill.
Wow. Sheriff Lamb, any parting thoughts?
I say it's not too late. You can still reach out to your legislators, your state senators, and let them know how you feel. I would strongly discourage any legalization of medical marijuana or recreational. There are states you can move to if that's what you want, and that's you're welcome to move to those states. California's got people leaving there in droves. You're welcome to move out there. I'll just give you this last caveat. If I'm going to sell you a cow, I'm going to sell you the milk. I'm not going to tell you about all the cow crap you got to clean up every day. And that's what's happening here. You're going to get sold a certain bill of goods, but you got to see past that into what it really is.
Chief?
I just think in closing, the thing I would tell people to do is, educate yourself on this bill. I mean, it is not what proponents say it is, and I just ask people to educate yourselves on it. Again, what Sheriff Lamb said, I happen to be president of a national organization, the Association of State Criminal Investigative Agencies. There's 47 of the states, 49 that are members of our association. Every director from those agencies tell me, Chief, if you don't have it, do everything you can to defeat this bill. It's not good for your state, and there's no need to put your children through the challenges of facing recreational medical marijuana in South Carolina.
Well, I hope we've helped educate you a little bit on this issue. And again, do your own research, talk to your legislators, talk to folks who know about this. I want to thank Sheriff Lamb for coming out here. Safe travels. Chief, thank you so much. Thank you for everything you've been doing on this front. And we thank you for watching.